Here we go. Okay.
All
take it
right.
away.
Well, my name is Tina Kotsalos, and I'm from the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. And usually we like to ask by show of hands how many people even have ever heard of that department. So Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities is your state financial regulator. And what that means is that we regulate state chartered banks, credit unions, investment firms, non-bank lenders such as check cashers, pawn shops, money transmitters. I come from the investment side, so when our departments merged, banking and securities, I was very surprised to find that we also regulated pawn shops and mortgage brokers, etc. So the presentation that I'm giving today, if I can change this, maybe.
Is it not working now?
Maybe I can just go down. Just the next slide is a disclaimer that this is not a legal interpretation, it's a service to the public. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So today's topics: what is elder financial exploitation? What makes older people more vulnerable? How can we help? And some common frauds and scams in the community. So exploitation versus fraud, I think we hear both of those words a lot. Exploitation, the difference is that exploitation usually involves somebody that the senior citizen knows, a family member, a caregiver, maybe an accountant, maybe somebody they've known for a while. And fraud is usually perpetrated by those pesky telemarketers that give us calls at all times of the day. So, I'm amazed at how many movies and documentaries have now been based on financial fraud. Many years ago, you didn't hear too much about financial abuse, but now it's everywhere. There's tons of movies out there about it. This is a good thing, I think, because it teaches people some of the signs and how easy it is to fall prey to con artists. And here in Pennsylvania, we have a higher senior population, so we really want to be prepared and have safeguards in place to protect the elderly. So why is it a concern to all of us? You know, this is a boring looking slide, but it's important to me, and here's why. When I speak to professionals, a lot of times, some of them may not understand why anybody can fall for a scam. But this slide tells a lot, and this is what it means. First of all, we talked about the demographic trends, the aging population, and that there's more to lose when you get older because you have less time to get that money back. Then we have the health-related effects of aging. As we age, there may be some cognitive decline. There may not be. You may live your whole life not having any cognitive decline. One thing that people need to understand, though, is that it's not black and white. It's not that either you have dementia or you don't. You know, there is a spectrum. You might have mild cognitive decline where you might have some difficulty making certain financial decisions. But boy, you can still go out and golf with your friends and go to the opera and enjoy the arts. Nothing else in your life is affected. And because of that, we need to be cautious and build a team around us. And when I talk about a team, I mean have an attorney, have an accountant, have a tax preparer, have a family member. They all form your team, and they're a form of checks and balances. Because if the one seems to be doing something that may not be right, the other one can check. And then we have the financial and retirement trends. At this stage in life, that the older you are, if you don't have your finances already in place and decisions made, there's a lot of complicated things to decide upon. So you want to do all of that ahead of time while you're still able to. Life-changing decisions and moments. What does a senior citizen, an older person, deal with on a day-to-day basis sometimes? A host of telemarketing calls. My phone went off at least 3 times with phone numbers I didn't know. One time I looked at my phone, it was ringing, and it was my own phone number calling me. And that's called spoofing, when they fake the phone number. But I have to pick up the phone because I help my parents with their doctor's appointments. But what that means is when I pick up that phone and it is a scam caller, I now am on the list of, she picks up the phone. So then I likely get a lot more calls in the next coming days or weeks. So you're barraged with a ton of telemarketing calls. You've got mail solicitations. You might be in the hospital and have a knee replacement and are on medication that is making you not think straight. You may have just moved into a new senior community and sold your house of 60 years. You may have just lost a loved one, and now you're becoming more isolated. Imagine all of that, and then ring, ring, and somebody gets you when you're vulnerable, when you're in an emotionally vulnerable state. And you can see how easy it is to maybe fall for a scam. And by the way, this is for a person at any age, because at some point, I believe that everybody is going to be presented in a situation where they may be scammed. The question is, what are you going to do at that point in time? The take-home point when I was talking about cognitive decline, and this is what I tell professionals all the time, is that let's say you have a friend or a neighbor and you think that they might be slipping, but you know that something's going on, that they're sending out letters, checks, and they might be going to the CVS to get gift cards. You know something's wrong. As long as you know something's wrong, that's enough for you to potentially make a call or talk to that person and give them some materials that we have. You don't have to be the person that diagnoses anybody. This is an example. This is Marjorie Jones. She was featured in a Bloomberg News article. She was a retired school teacher, legally blind, very conservative with her money. She got a call, and they said she won the sweepstakes. They told her all you have to do is send a check to pay for the taxes and for us to release the money. So she did it. And then a whole ring of fraudsters got in on the action and just kept calling her, making more demands on, this is how you're going to get the money. You need to pay this fee, this fee, this fee. She took out a reverse mortgage. She cashed in a life insurance policy. And by the end, she committed suicide. She was so embarrassed by her situation. She called her niece for money. And she had reached such a low point, a woman that was so educated and always on top of her finances. But they caught her at a time when she was vulnerable. And you know, afterward, when they went to her house, they found boxes of letters and receipts for money transmitters, wired money. They found her phone that had calls from all these random callers, and her bank account had only $69 left in it. They had taken her entire life savings. This is an example of a elder financial fraud. Elder financial exploitation is an example of Ruth Mitchell, who lived in Beaver, PA. Her accountant, of 20 years, he was taking advantage of his customers that he's had forever. They had a relationship with him, they knew him, they trusted him. He told them he had a great investment opportunity in these high yield bonds. It turns out he was not investing any of their money. It was going into his own bank account. And occasionally he would give some money back, but it was only their own money, just making them think that they're making money. She ended up having to go back to work, as well as her husband, and their lives changed forever. They had to move to Arizona to be closer to their kids, and they lost their entire life savings. Ruth, thankfully, goes out to the public and gives presentations. She's a victim that is willing to go out and speak, which is a wonderful thing. So she educates a lot of people. So as we talked about, it can be a stranger or it can be a family member, but unfortunately it's usually family members that commit these crimes. So what can we do if we know of somebody that suddenly is starting to deteriorate physically, maybe isolated, doesn't want to come to the library anymore like they used to, or has, is just acting differently? That could be a red flag. Another thing that we can do is open the door by saying, hey, I read that New York Times article about a senior being financially exploited. Kind of opening the door for them. Hey, did you see that on TV about the latest scam? There was a story out of New Mexico. There was a woman, and she kept sending money, and her mailman said, listen, Jenny, this is a scam. Please stop sending these checks. And she said, no, no, no. I believe that it's real. So then he called the police, and the police went to her door and said, ma'am, this is a scam. Stop sending. And she said, nope, I believe it. She went to the bank tried stopping her. She said, nope. She went to her pharmacist to complain about the bank and said, the bank won't give me my money to send this money. And the pharmacist said to her, Jenny, it's a scam. And she believed the pharmacist. So you never know who that person is gonna be. You know, I would have thought the police or, you know, the bank, but she didn't believe anybody until she got to her pharmacist, and she believed the pharmacist. So again, these are some things to think about.
How did the postman know she was sending checks?
He could see who she was sending them to. These addresses looked suspicious to him. And so, and then she was getting a large amount of mail coming to her home. But, which, by the way, now that we're speaking of mail, I'm sure that you have probably heard about the issues with mail lately and people stealing mail to get checks, and they wash the checks. Correct. So what we've been advised from the postal inspectors is if you're sending mail to go into the post office and put it in the slot. The blue boxes are not safe. People go at night, they use fishing with sticky items, they throw them in, and they go fishing for that mail. So, there's mandatory reporters that may suspect abuse and voluntary reporters as everyone else. So let's say that you suspect somebody is being abused. You can call Adult Protective Services, and if you don't want to be involved in somebody's business, you can call anonymously. I think that's one thing that many people, especially like accountants or tax preparers, feel like they can't do that, but you actually can anonymously call if you think that something's wrong. Consumers, according to the FTC, consumers reported losing more than $5.8 billion. It's probably closer to $37 billion plus to fraud. That is a very low number. So let's go through some of the latest scams. We have the imposter scam. Now we're generalizing that, but by imposter scam we mean it's somebody that might call and say that they're the IRS. The IRS is not going to call you. They're going to send you a letter. It could be a tech support. You're on your laptop and a Microsoft box pops up and says there's a virus. What I've been told from IT is unplug that computer. Unplug it. If you get back on and you still see there's issues, you take it to Best Buy or the Geek Squad. But many people are using these Microsoft scams saying, I have all your information, and asking for ransom money. And people are losing a lot of money to these computer tech scams. International lottery we talked about, or a family friend in distress. Have you heard about the grandparent scam? Yeah. So we do a lot of scam jam events in community centers, and we have people in the audience that have fallen for the grandparent scam. And one thing that we say that you can protect yourself is hang up and call back that person, or if they say they're in Mexico or far away, call a family member to find out whether it's them or not. There's a lot of things we can do to protect ourselves, rather than just immediately playing on our emotions and sending money. The romance scam is rampant. During COVID, many people were online, like Facebook, and there were imposters targeting lonely, isolated people and meeting them online and saying, hey, I really want to get to know you. And they would begin conversations, and they would put fake photos of themselves and say, you know, we're close now, and I'm a veteran, you're a veteran, will you please send me some money? I've hit hard times. And then it keeps happening, and it keeps happening, and it keeps happening. And we have an AARP fraud volunteer named Kate Kleiner who tells of her story of being defrauded in a romance scam. She lost her entire life savings. This gentleman continued to pursue her. She was so broke that she needed fans to keep her house cool, and the one caught on fire, and her whole house burnt down with, I believe, 6 of her puppies in it. Her friends ended up setting up a GoFundMe account for her, and would you believe it, that con artist still was calling her, asking for money. And she says to him, I lost everything. Do you know what he said? No, you didn't. Your friend set up a GoFundMe account. That person was following her on every move. And it's very hard to stop these calls coming in because they have the apps that you can't trace, like WhatsApp. So they're very prevalent, they're very good at what they do. And another big scheme is investment frauds. Investment frauds take a lot of money. We talked about Barry Corkin with the fake investment fraud. There's these free lunch seminars that are offered all the time. Annuities are pitched to senior citizens. I had an 80-year-old veteran that was pitched a 20-year annuity. He came to our office. We went back and spoke to the financial professional and said this is an unsuitable investment. And they gave the money back because that was not suitable. Financial professionals have a responsibility to provide suitable investments to them. So sometimes people think there's nothing they can do, they made a bad decision, but that's not always the case. Have either of you heard of Jan Lewandowski, the Polka
Yes.
King out of Hazelton? Jan Lewandowski was the Polka King. He had a big following. Unfortunately, he did commit investment fraud. He pitched to his followers wonderful returns. If they would just give him money, he would invest in it. He took them to Rome. He went and took them to see the Pope, Vatican, and this actually became a movie on Netflix. Yes, I was gonna show a clip, but I wasn't sure about the audio. With Jack Black plays him, and it is a fascinating story. Now, Jan Lewandowski served time in jail. I believe he defrauded $4.9 million to investors. He defrauded, and he ended up getting out of jail. And do you know what he did after that? He decided he was going to try to be a rapping polka king. And there is a clip of that, of him rapping. He thought he was going to reinvent himself. So sometimes these con artists just don't stop.
I don't think that was going over with the polka fan people.
Right. And if you remember Barry that I was telling you about, the CPA, when he got out of jail, he tried to become a minister.
That I can, yeah.
Yep.
Just go from one foot.
Right, so the Ponzi scheme, rob Peter to pay Paul. How about it? Pay new investors with old investors' money. And of course, Bernie Madoff is the one that really brought to light the Ponzi scheme and how affinity fraud is often used. Affinity fraud is when we have something in common so you can trust me. So with affinity fraud, members of the military are big targets. Church groups are large targets. There was a recent case of Trickling Springs in Lancaster that targeted the Mennonite community. So affinity fraud and Ponzi schemes often go hand in hand. We talked about the romance scams and gift cards. Gift cards don't pay bills. What we mean by that is often a scammer might say, I'm the IRS, we can resolve this issue and you won't go to jail, just send us a gift card. Or, this is the police, you have an overdue fine, don't worry, all you have to do is get a gift card, scratch the back, and tell me the numbers. It's become such an issue that we actually go to retailers and train their staff on gift card scams. So my colleague and I were at the Dollar Tree one day, and there was a couple in front of us buying a lot of gift cards. And we took our little flyer here and we handed that to them because we thought it looked very suspicious. Virtual scams, the phishing emails, the fake websites, they can do, if I wanted to, I could cut and paste virtually any logo I wanted and put it on a letter or make a website of my own. And now, I'm sure you've heard about artificial intelligence, which artificial intelligence takes all that information and then creates a reality of its own, and that's going to be very dangerous. As long as we are aware and we keep ourselves updated on the latest scams, we can protect ourselves. It's going to be tricky, but if we just keep reading and keep being aware of these things and think twice, don't think on emotions, that's the best way to keep yourself from falling victim to a scam. So if you do become a victim, what can you do? This is a list. You can call the company's fraud department. You can file a police report. Sometimes the police are unaware of some of these complicated financial scams. So it's always good to check with the Attorney General's office and the Federal Trade Commission. Today I have resources for you to take home with you should you ever need them. And the PA Department of Banking and Securities is where I come from. We have a 1-800 number, and we have people that answer the phone on the other end of the line. And they are there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And if you're not sure if it's a question for our department, that's okay, because we will direct you to the right department if it's not us. So that's a very important number to have, especially if you have any issues with your bank or credit union or even your investment professional. Some more resources to learn about investing if you're interested: investor.gov, consumerfinance.gov, and of course ftc.gov/ID theft. So if you do anything today, unless you've already done it, I recommend that you freeze your credit. What that means is you are putting a hold on your credit so that nobody can go in and get your information and open new credit in your name. What that means is they go and open a new credit card in your name. Your existing credit, you can go and shop and use your credit cards. I had a letter in the mail from Costco saying that my new card was coming. I already had a Costco card. Somebody opened a new card in my name. Had I frozen my credit, they would have never been able to do that, because in order to get credit, they need to check your credit. If you put a freeze on that and they can't check your credit, they can't open new credit. This is becoming one of the latest issues, because there are even stories of siblings getting their siblings' information and getting a mortgage out in their siblings' name. But if they had their credit frozen, they wouldn't have to. Now, you do that at each of the credit services here, the Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and I always tell people, when you do freeze your credit, you're probably going to start getting advertising emails for other services, paid services that they provide. You can ignore them. Your credit is frozen. Now, I went to buy a car, and they came out and said, "Ma'am, would you unfreeze your credit, please?" And I thought, wow, it worked. Fantastic, it worked. So I went in, I had my password, and I clicked unfreeze. Bought the car, went back in, froze it again. This is very important, a very good tip, because it's something we can proactively do, and it's free. This is our email, informed@pa.gov. Should you ever have a quick question or you would like us to host an event in your area, we play fraud bingo, which is bingo, but you learn about fraud. We give away prizes, and it's a fun and interactive game where you're in a community setting, and oftentimes we find that the participants start telling us about their fraud stories, and they each talk to each other and say, "Did you hear about this?" So it's a fun game, and it's for any groups. We also do scam jams, where we invite the Attorney General's office to come and speak, and the local police. The local police come in and tell us what the latest scams are, and the district attorney's office. So all of these happen. We usually work with a representative's or senator's office, but if you wanted, we can always inform you if we're in the area. And I am leaving plenty of time for some questions, but first, I wanted to tell you about Confessions of a Scam Artist. This is one of my favorite publications. It's in large print. And this is a former con artist who is interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal reporter says, "So how did you choose who to target?" And he says, "Well, one of my favorite targets were dentists. They were easy victims of fraud." And the reporter said, "Why?" And he said, "Because dentists just want to be loved." And that was one of the tactics that he used. He found vulnerable populations. So all of these materials, they have a story and they have good information, and they remind us of what we need to look out for when sometimes we think, no, it couldn't happen to me. It can happen to anybody, and it has happened to so many people. It has happened to foundations, police have been scammed. We were at a scam jam last week, and the one policeman told us that he and his wife consolidated their debt with a company, and the company said, don't worry, be paying us, we're consolidating your debt, you don't need to contact any of the debtors. And it turns out they were not doing it all, and his wife's car was being repossessed until he found out that it was all a scam. And that was a local police officer. I actually give him a lot of credit for telling that story to the public, but he felt so strongly to share that and to just show that anybody can fall victim to a scam. So at this point in time, I'd love to take any questions you may have, and online, Mary Beth has any questions.
Actually, I do.
Great.
Wonderful.
Is there an agency that oversees churches? Because I believe a family member is being swindled by a church that has taken about 50% of his salary for many years.
Wow.
And he continually gives that amount of money away on a monthly basis.
Is it a donation he's making?
He'll
or-
say a tithe and an offering,
Okay.
but there's no way he makes the amount of money that is equivalent to a tithe. There's no way.
Wow.
And I've talked to him, his lawyer, Department of Aging, and everybody will say there's nothing that can be done about it.
And it's not that he's being pitched an investment, he is giving it as a donation, you say?
Yeah,
And Department of Aging,
yeah.
they looked into it, huh?
And they told me, it may turn out because he wants to do this, there's nothing that can be done about it.
Do you know if they have had Adult Protective Services go to check his capacity?
They sent somebody out, I don't know if it was Protective Services,
Okay,
but whatever happened, however it was presented,
because.
he got very mad at me and he cut me off 100%.
Wow, because Protective Services is the first person I would think of, but now that you bring that up, I do want to say something about churches. Churches are often targets for frauds as well. I know that's not in this case, Mary Beth, this is different, but you made me remember something. And that is that sometimes priests are targeted and the priests don't know that they're being targeted to pitch. They think things are legitimate. So, yeah. And my priest was actually, his email was hacked into, and in the email it went out to the parishioners asking for gift cards. And then they started showing up at the church with the gift cards, and he said, "What is this?" And it was that. Now, Mary Beth, if you'd like, wow, I do have contacts at Adult Protective Services where I can check with them just to be sure that somebody from Adult Protective Services did reach out. And so I'm gonna put my email up again, because I think that you're trying to do a good thing here. But sometimes it's very difficult in a situation like that, especially. The other thing that we tell people is people are allowed to make bad decisions unless there might be some cognitive decline where they don't even know that they're making the bad decision. And that's where the lines get blurry. And Mary Beth, I think that's where you're talking about, that there may be some blurring of the lines there.
Well, he has been diagnosed with short-term memory loss, which, when you said dementia, is a spectrum.
Yes.
He's somewhere on that spectrum.
Right.
But, he presents as a very alpha male who's in control of everything.
Right. Right. That's a very difficult situation. And I commend you for trying to do something about it.
Well, I'm failing.
It's not you that's failing, it's the situation. You did all that you could do. You took the steps that you felt were necessary to protect him. But it is sometimes difficult to protect people from themselves, isn't it? In a lot of these situations. So what we try to do, especially with these presentations, is spread the awareness so that we can try to build that safety net. And Mary Beth, that's what you were doing. So I really commend you for that.
Well, I don't know, this may be, but I was thinking, I would like the FBI to investigate this church. And that might not be the right agency, or, I don't know, but I think you're not gonna stop it on his end.
Right. You think
Yeah,
there's something
like the-
more. Well, why don't we talk offline? Because the Attorney General's office might be a good resource at this point too.
Okay. Okay, so is that your email?
Yep, informed@pa.gov. The other thing is, oftentimes when there's people that think a fellow, whether it be a nursing home resident or senior center friend, are being defrauded, and they're not listening to anybody, they have us come out and do the fraud bingo or a scam jam, where we're in a group setting. We go to churches as well and give presentations on fraud. So that just, I'm just putting that out there as well. And that has helped in the past if they could get that person to come to attend. So that's another way. What are you all seeing out there? What do you find baffling or questioning? Anything in particular?
So it's the bottom line, really be wary of anytime you get something in the mail or a phone call.
Yes.
Really just,
As much as you can,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't have to pick up that phone.
I mean, if it's coming from, St. Jude's, that's
Mhm.
gonna be legit, hopefully.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is,
Or
if
Children's Hospital. I
if
think.
somebody calls you or you get something in the mail that you think is suspicious, go and look up the phone number and call back.
Yeah.
Or look at the address or look at that, any solicitation you get anymore. Recently in the Philly area, people were getting text messages from Easy Pass saying they had overdue bills. And many fell for it, and it was not Easy Pass.
Yeah.
So they're infiltrating everywhere.
I have received emails saying that my, Sirius,
Satellite.
subscription is expiring. I don't have one.
Right.
And I get Netflix. Well, our Netflix, the bill comes out of, is charged to our Visa card.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
that it made you think for a minute. Wait, there's no way.
Yes. And the other thing that I was told by, our office is filled with attorneys, examiners, and investigators, and they told me, Tina, when you go out and speak to the public, can you tell them something? And I said, what? And they said, read your statements.
Mm-hmm.
Read any and all statements you
yes.
have. For any discrepancies,
Mm-hmm.
your investments, anything, your bank accounts, read your statements. Yeah. And don't always think if you do fall for a scam, don't think, well, it was my fault, I signed off on it. Sometimes there are ramifications in certain situations where you can get your money back. Now, a lot of times, the majority of the time, if you're giving money through a wire fraud or something like that, it's nearly impossible to get money back. But if it's working with a financial professional that maybe puts you in an unsuitable investment, or if you're working with a bank and something's off on the statements, there's help that you can get. And if you're not getting callbacks from any of these financial professionals, that's when you can call us and we can help facilitate that. And that concludes my presentation. And it's still light outside. Because we like these longer days, don't we?
Yes.
And I want to thank the library and Mark for inviting us here. And I encourage you all to have a scam jam in your community or a fraud bingo, which is also part of a scam jam. Scam jam is a little bit of a longer presentation with speakers that join me to talk about other types of frauds. Thank you, Mary Beth, for joining us online. I saw that you said thank you. And I hope that we can meet up again at some point and again talk about the latest scams, because that is the best. Education is the best preventive medicine for fraud. So So, thank you.
Appreciate
Very
it.
good, thank you.
Yeah.